How is it possible to work 3 jobs at the same time? Well, I'll tell you, it's getting good at one skill: time management. Now, I worked 3 jobs for 4 years, and through that time, it became very clear to me that there are 4 distinct levels to time management. And to be overemployed, you need to be that level 4, particularly if you want to have a life outside of work. And actually, even if you have no plans on working more than one full-time job at the same time, I still think it is the most important skill you can learn in your life. I mean, we know this. Time is our single most valuable and scarce resource. Importantly, time management is not just about squeezing every modicum of productivity out of our lives, but instead deploying our time thoughtfully so that we can do more of what we really want to do with our lives. In this video, I will take you through the 4 different levels of time management, as if it was a video game, with each of these levels being a distinct unlock of skills and a characterization of how people approach video games, going from button masher to speedrunner, and eventually to the final level needed for overemployment. By the end, you should know exactly where you're deficient and the path that you can take to master your time. But before we go there, the most important step to start off with is to know how we're currently spending our time. And I'm talking about a time audit. See, we can think of this as the character selection screen, where we're figuring out what traits our character has so that we can set off on our mission. Now, we all have roughly 16 hours if we're sleeping for the requisite 8 hours. So how are we filling that time? If you ask most people, even if they think they know, they are off by at least 30%, if not more. And those are the people who think they're tracking it. Most people have no idea. We need an accurate starting point. In order to improve, we need to have clean metrics so that we know what we need to work on. This will also help us gauge which level we are at later on. So take the next week. Actually, none of you will do that. Let's just take one day. And I want you to list out exactly what you do from the time you wake up until you go to sleep. It doesn't need to be to the minute, but it needs to be as accurate as possible to paint a clear picture. Now, the Hawthorne effect will come into play. We act differently when we know we are being observed. So that's why I say to do it for a week, because we can fake productivity maybe for a day, eking out a little bit more, knowing that we're watched, but over a week, our true colors will show and the cracks in our foundation will be more obvious. And while most of the time I've done it in the past, I've used Google Calendar, I recently found a much better way, and that is using a field notebook. It's a little tiny notebook that can fit inside any pocket you have on your clothes. And I found it is the perfect size where it is not getting in the way. Where in Google Calendar, I was pulling out my phone or having to reference my laptop, and the longest, or the shortest block of time you can have is 15 minutes. I just found that writing it down by hand, it's just easier. When I first started doing this, I would list out every activity to the T, but now I find that grouping the activities more generally is a little bit easier and can simplify the process. So these are the different activities that I do. Obviously, do what you want, but we want to make sure that it's not adding too much friction into our lives. Now, you could just as easily do it in a notepad file on your phone, but wherever I can, I'm trying to eliminate my phone from my life. So doing it on a paper feels like it's achieving that objective. So now once we have our list of things that we did, for me, this was yesterday, we go through it and we start to categorize these different things and start to notice where we are wasting our time, what is not providing any value. And when we start to analyze how we spend our time, we can start to see where the results come from. You've probably heard of the Pareto principle or the 80-20 rule. If you haven't, basically an Italian economist named Vilfredo Pareto was studying wealth distributions between countries, and he noticed that they followed a very distinct pattern where 80% of the wealth was controlled by 20% of the people. And this was a groundbreaking discovery until later they realized that it was much bigger than they even thought, where seemingly everything fits into this principle. Even random things like 80% of the eggs are produced by 20% of the chickens, or 80% of the crimes are committed by 20% of the criminals. And he goes on and on and on into many examples. But for our case, we need to figure out what the 20% of activities that we are doing that are disproportionately driving results. And then we can reverse engineer it and find the things that are taking a disproportionate amount of time for very little results and remove those. So now, hopefully we understand our time a little bit better. I like to do a time audit every 6 months or so just to see how I'm spending my time. But now let's get to the real meat and potatoes of the video game progression. Starting off with level 1, the button masher. So at this level, you're just getting your sea legs. You just completed Tutorial Island, but you have no idea about the game mechanics. You have no systems or strategies. You're just frantically hitting buttons. Some things work, most don't. And this is how I was during the pandemic when I started working for Merrill Lynch. I was working my butt off to get a promotion, 8 to 8 every single day, first one in, last one out, to show my boss that I really cared. And even though I was constantly busy and working hard, not much actually came from it. I wasn't making much progress towards the bigger projects or goals that I had, and I was saying yes to everything. If you sent me a ping to do something, I would drop everything and do it immediately. I thought the faster I could complete the tasks, 1, the more people would like me, and 2, the more time I would have after work to do what I wanted to. And exactly the opposite happened. The more I said yes, the less people respected me and my time, so they would dump grunt work onto me, and the less time I would have after work. And the faster I got work done, the more work I was given. I wasn't using a schedule at all, besides checking to see which meetings I had during the day. Now, I had no idea how I was actually spending my time, and particularly outside of work, I got basically nothing done. My larger goals hadn't been defined at all, so they were amorphous and I didn't even know how to start them. So purely by taking the step of going through and doing a time audit, you level out of level 1 into level 2. And at this point, you start to know what you're doing. You're at the peak of the Dunning-Kruger curve, so you don't even know what you don't know yet, and you think you're very good. Maybe skill-based matchmaking hasn't caught up to you yet, so you're destroying people without knowing of the levels that exist above you. You know the basic controls, but you haven't yet mastered the mechanics or strategy. See, and at this point, you believe that multitasking is a superpower. You can cram so many things in your day, blissfully unaware of the costs of context switching. You're interested in productivity, and you've probably even implemented some practices or tips recommended from some experts. Now, the main upgrade over level 1 is that now you have a to-do list. But everything you need to do is popped on to the list, and you usually follow it linearly without putting too much thought into how it's ordered. Now, with everything on the list, it does make meeting deadlines a little bit easier, and the difference is noticeable. You're able to chug through more work, and people start to notice this as well. Thus, you're given more work. You're in a car, you recently finished upgrading it, your engine swapped a big honking V8 in it, you put some aero on the back for more downforce, you got the pedal to the metal, and you are screaming down the road. Now you're traveling really quickly, but you have no idea where you're going. We aren't using the mini-map, and we're definitely not using waypoints. See, this is where most productivity hacks fail us. We get really good at doing work and the satisfaction of ticking things off of our list, but we're usually focusing on the wrong things. See, as the GOAT Peter Drucker would say, there is nothing so useless as doing efficiently things that shouldn't be done at all. And that's where the next level up for level 3 gets us. And this is the speedrunner. See, game mechanics are second nature now, and we're starting to exploit them. And at this point, we're not just thinking about getting the right things done. You're not just playing the game, you're optimizing the run. The biggest difference by far is priorities. The big P. Instead of putting everything into one list, they're now in 3 distinct buckets. Your high priority, which you cap to 3 items, knowing that you can't take on too many at once. Your nice to have, which if these are completed in a reasonable fashion, you can move on to them. And your backlog, where everything else falls into. And every morning you review this list and categorize what are your most important tasks that move the needle the furthest each day, as opposed to just the things that you can do the quickest or the easiest. Now, I used to write all my to-do lists on notebooks, And then once I scaled up to having 3 jobs, I had notebooks all over the place. I was unable to find anything until I got a remarkable tablet. Made a gigantic difference where now I had folders for each job, a to-do list for each day, and my notes from meetings and different projects organized more effectively. I think I'm going to make a video on note-taking when it comes to being overemployed specifically, because it was an absolute game changer for me. Now on my to-do list, I bold the items that are the most important tasks. For me, I keep it to just 3 items, and the total list can be no more than 8 items. And for me and many others, if a task takes a minute or less to do, I will just do it immediately instead of even writing it on the to-do list. But sometimes I will write it just to, get the satisfaction of ticking it off. We're all human. Now on all of my tasks, specifically when they're work-related items, when someone assigns me something, I will ask when they need it by. This sounds pretty trivial, but a lot of times we assume when someone will need something, and we always assume that it's ASAP. But I try to see basically what's the latest that I can deliver this. I'm a very busy person. When's the latest I can get it? And then people will give you a more reasonable timeline, and likely most of the things in the to-do list can be pushed to the backlog. Big thing when having multiple jobs is chunking the work. I'm not going to spend 2 minutes here, 5 minutes here doing something because I'm already switching between so many different tasks. Instead, I bulk do the tasks in long uninterrupted sections when I have enough work to do. And then I can complete a week's worth of work for one job in 3 to 4 hours, as opposed to doing it in little 5-minute chunks. Now, the most important thing I do when I have my to-do list completed is pull up my calendar. And then I will actually schedule in the time that I'm going to do each one of those tasks. And these tasks aren't even work related. For things like going to the gym or taking a break, reading, meditating, I will schedule everything. Now this might not work for everyone. If your day is a little bit hectic and kind of in the air, completely different every single day, then this might not be too helpful. But for me, working remotely and having most days fall into a rhythm, it was huge. And generally, I try to give myself less time than I may actually need to do a task. And now this is just in taking advantage of Parkinson's law, where the work will expand to the time that we give it. And actually, funny enough, Parkinson's law actually started off as a joke. It was written by the humorist, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but his last name is Parkinson. But we've soon adopted it to see that there is some truth in it. And there's even more truth in deadline pressure. You'd be amazed how quickly you can summon up some effort and enter into the flow state when a looming deadline is approaching for a task that you didn't think you can complete in a certain amount of time. For instance, when you have a research paper due the next day and suddenly you write 40 magical pages just within one caffeine-fueled night. It's all about doing more with less. Now at this level, you can complete work far faster and more effectively than most people. And paradoxically, people will take notice of this, label you as a top performer, and less work will come to you because people will value your time more. You are seen as critical now, your time is more valuable, thus less lower priority tasks will come to you than a level 2 or a level 1 worker. And this is a great place to be. You can park here for the rest of your career. But if you want to get overemployed, you need to go to level 4, which is of the game designer. See, at this stage, you're going into the great beyond, a rarefied position, the top 1%. You're no longer playing the game, you're redesigning it to work for you. One of the main switches is, instead of just thinking about time management, you're also thinking about energy management. Now, similar to a time audit, we can also do an energy audit. Now, I kind of stole this idea from Andrew Huberman, but basically you go throughout your day and plot where your energy level is. For instance, after I eat, there's a natural lull, and particularly around 2 to 4 each day, I am basically useless. So now when we think about scheduling tasks, we can fit them into the right time for each day. For instance, if I wanted to do creative tasks, scheduling it from 2 to 4 is pointless. I am not going to drum up the same level of ideas at the same intensity. I just cannot work creatively with the same efficiency as if I was to schedule it earlier in the morning or later at night. And for me, those tasks that have the most mental friction, I need to schedule earlier in the day, because if it goes later, I end up pushing them off and they take longer than they should. But if I have a really boring assignment at a bank that I work for, we had to fill out specific fields within Jira for every single one of the tickets to make sure that they were compliant. And this is one of the things that people hated doing. You were a rarefied genius if you're able to go through and do them effectively. And I found that scheduling it into that 2 to 4 period when I have an energy lull and I don't feel like doing anything was perfect. I could just grind through this mindless task and kill them off within a day or two. Let me ask you a question. Who do you think walks the most in the NBA? Your gut reaction is probably the laziest player. Nope. LeBron James. Arguably one of the best players of all time. Now, likely we aren't built like LeBron James, but we can definitely learn from him to pick our battles intentionally. At this stage, we need to learn how to delegate really effectively. If people come to us with a task, even if we know that it's easy and we can finish it in a reasonable amount of time, being able to delegate it out so that it doesn't fall into our lap repeatedly, particularly if it is a lower value task. The beautiful thing about routing and delegating is if someone comes to you with a task that they need completed and you send them to a person that can do it just as effectively, you are still seen as helpful because you are negotiating that flow of work, even though you've done basically nothing. Along with that, scheduling in rest and fun activities is absolutely critical. I found in my first year of working 3 jobs, I burned out very quickly because I was solely focused on work. When I was outside of work, I was optimizing my schedules to make sure that there were no conflicting meetings, or I was just ruminating about what I could have done better. And the real difference came in the second year when I started playing ping pong competitively. And not only did this give me a deadline where my day had to end at 6 p.m. when I had a ping pong lesson, it also gave me just a way to relax, blow off steam, and not think about work. And now I think there's something to be said in the beginning. Once you start working more than one job, it will be a bumpy road and you need to figure out what the best practices are. But then being able to separate yourself from your work, take a step back and rest will mean that you can do it for longer without burning out. Now, I'm still not sure how effective this is or if this is taking it a bit too far, but on a daily basis, I would also schedule in 15 minutes of rest, literally to do sometimes nothing. I found that the best things I could do outside of literally laying there doing nothing were reading, meditating, stretching, going for a walk, things that fill our cup, not watching TV or scrolling endlessly on our phone. The biggest predictor of if it is filling our cup or taking away is after the task, how do you feel? Do you feel like you need to go back to the task to take another break? If so, that probably means that it is not a proper restful activity. Now, another thing that made a huge difference for me in my longevity of overemployment and structuring my day was sacred morning time. Now, when I started working, I was in the office and I would map out exactly how long it took to wake up, get dressed, get ready, and drive into the office. And then I would wake up 1 minute before. I think it took me 16 minutes door to door to get to work. So I woke up 17 minutes earlier than that. And this meant that there was absolutely no leeway. Every single day I was getting to work at exactly 9:01, 9:02, and I was starting the day off stressed and in an anxious fight or flight type mode. And the biggest switch literally came from just moving my wake up time back 15 or 30 minutes. And this meant that I was able to go about my morning a little more leisurely. I could journal in the morning. I can walk around, get a cup of coffee, and make it into the office where I was relaxed and not in a frantic state. And even when I started working remotely, I would wake up at 8:59 for my 9 o'clock meeting, and moving it back instead to 8:30 where I could make some breakfast, write, do whatever, made it so that I wasn't starting off in a completely stressed, manic state, which would then continue for most, if not all, of the rest of the day. And at this level, systemization is absolutely key. If there are any tasks that you do repeatedly, make a to-do list. This sounds really dumb, but it makes a huge difference on just the cognitive load that is required to remember every single detail of the task. Instead, just offload it to a piece of paper and literally tick through whenever you have to do something repeatedly. This makes it so that we never forget anything and it's less draining. And that's the key, preserving our energy. I would say one of the most important systems that I integrated was for conflicting meetings. Now, this is something that most of the time I would try to schedule around and avoid it, where I get the meeting moved or not show up to one of the meetings, but there's many times where it is unavoidable and you will be in 2 meetings at the same time. And when I started, I would just sit there listening for my name, trying to hear both of them. It drives you absolutely crazy, and having to piggyback on the excuse, "Sorry, I was on mute, what did you say?" Which for whatever reason made sense to people, and they would repeat back whatever was going on in the meeting. And the worst part was, when the next day came around, if anyone was talking about the meeting that we had, I would have absolutely no idea what was going on, just because there was so much sensory input going on. I wasn't soaking in anything. That was until I implemented Otter.ai. This is not sponsored, but I basically have it running in the background of each one of my meetings. And it's basically an AI note taker. At the end of the meeting, I would have it summarize what happened in the meeting, give me action notes. Then I would have a Zapier integration, which would then send me an email with those summaries and action items that I could then distribute to the team. And this made it so it seemed like I was paying attention, because how could I write notes and action items if I wasn't paying attention? Now I'm going to create another video on the specific tools and other strategies I used for conflicting meetings, because that is a big sticking point people have with working multiple jobs. So subscribe, plenty more to come. If you don't want to subscribe, at least give me a like. Thanks for watching.